I am Danielle MacCallum, the Territory Manager for Southern Alberta, and with me today are Kim Leitch, who is our new Territory Manager for Central and Northern Alberta, and Adam Parker, who is a silage specialist from Ontario. Today we're going to talk about early frost when we get one near silage timing. So, Kim, do you want to let us know how things are going in your area?
Absolutely. So September 5th had reports of frost where lows, more Cold Lake area, Tullaby Lake, lows of -3. So which has put guys a little bit nervous. And so we thought, okay, this is a great opportunity. We're into September. Let's reinform you folks as to what you can do. So this corn is looking at to be the blister, definitely before early dent. So somebody goes out there, Adam, they see frost. They're wondering, what do I do? What am I looking for? So what would you do?
Sure. So the big thing to do is to get an understanding of what temperature you got to as far as the frost severity and also the duration. So corn obviously is not tolerant to frost and will get damaged, but let's just say a 0 or -1 frost for probably an hour or two early in the morning. Really not a big concern. You're probably going to lose the top couple leaves, but it's really not going to impact a lot of yield or quality aspect. And for the most part, the corn will keep on moving on in its life cycle, even though you lose the top couple leaves. Bigger concerns is when you get to probably that -2, where you start looking at potentially killing some of the stalk up in the upper part of the canopy, and then probably the worst case scenario is a -3, -4 for an extended couple hours, where you actually have potential to kill the stalk and kill the shank, more importantly. So try to dig through some weather data or look at any apps that you have to really understand how cold it got and for how long. And then also then you have to walk into your field, and it's going to be walking in your field day one. You're not going to be able to read it that well. You're really going to have to give it a couple of days to let that tissue really decide if it's going to die or not, and then evaluate at what point in the canopy or the stalk that frost got into, and then evaluate it probably 2 to 3 days after. So with that is to understand, okay, is the tissue in the stalk still green and nice and white and crisp, or is it now a bit of a brown and slimy color? Where that is at what point in the canopy, whether it's 2 or 3 feet down in the canopy, or is it right down by the ear, is going to indicate, how far that cold made it in. So important to know is that if we only kill off the stalk above the ear, there's still a lot of opportunity for the cob to translocate the nutrients out of the stalk that's still alive and continue to grain fill and put more starch and energy into the ear, and also dry down naturally. So the bigger concern, if we did get down to a -3, -4, and we killed the shank, so the shank's basically the limb between the stalk and the ear. We want that the lifeline of the cob. We want to make sure that that's still nice and green. If it's not, then that is kind of a worst case scenario, where basically the plants is going to start to desiccate after that tissue's been damaged and dry down basically in the environment. If the shank in the stalk is still alive, the best thing to do is to monitor closely, but let it continue to do its natural thing and develop that ear as best it can, and still try to catch it at the right harvest moisture. So the big thing, regardless on whenever you're chopping silage, is to still make sure you're catching it at the right harvest moisture. So pits or dry over piles, 65-70% whole plant moisture is what you're going to target.
Okay, so what happens where right now that area has been particularly dry? Is that going to make a difference?
So let's say so dry soils will hold less heat in, and as well probably maybe drought-prone corn doesn't have as thick of a canopy. So those are situations where the frost is maybe actually be more impactful than it would have been if it was wet or that the canopy was dense and thick. You have to evaluate that as well. But then again, as we look at this next week here, if we're going to be hot and dry and windy, so those are prime drying conditions, and it's going to really accelerate the dry down curve of that plant if we did get some severe frost.
Okay, so then you're talking about the shank. If person's out there monitoring, and the shank then did turn. How long after would they have to decide if they're going to silage or not?
So that plant, if you were at blistered to milky stage, was probably 80-85% whole plant moisture. I've seen instances where we would drop well over a point a day in moisture if it stays hot and dry and windy. Like in some instances, we could drop 10% in a week. But again, 85% down to 75% in a week, you're still not at harvest moisture. So you still want to catch it in that probably, definitely low 70s to high 60s. So the best thing to do is if you deem that the plant has been killed, is get a starting point, do a chipper test now to get your baseline of where you are at for whole plant moisture, and then estimate probably at least a point a day dry down, and then estimate out is that 10-14 days from now when that might be there. But you're going to probably want to test every 3 days to find that dry down curve, because it's going to be environmental and weather depending.
Okay.
Great. Well, why don't we wrap it up there? Thank you so much for Adam and Kim giving us this nice update on what's going on. Thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, please contact your local Maizex dealer. And happy harvest.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.